think if you look at businesses in particular, servant leadership is making a huge resurgence across so many industries right now, where even in a business context, we're looking at every interaction as how can I be of service to this person? Take that outside the boardroom, man. Take that outside of the office. Take that to the streets. Have that same mentality when you're out there, because you can do something for literally anybody. I don't care how well off or how bad off they are. There's something you can do for everybody you come into contact with. And look, man, life's just a lot more fun when you approach it in that manner.
Leaders are not born in a womb. They are forged through heat, pressure, and a whole lot of sweat. The Fire Forged Leader podcast serves the audience through exploring leadership at work, in the community, and with the family, using a practical perspective and real-life experiences from the host, Steve Baumgartner, and his guests in The Forge. Now, it's time to enter the Forge with the Fire Forged Leader.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the Fire Forged Leader podcast. Today we have a frontline hero, I'm going to call him, Ben Owen. Ben is the founder of Black Rifle Company. Of course, in parentheses, we always got to say not coffee. I'll let him explain to you what that is here in a little bit. He's also the founder of a couple of wonderful organizations called Flanders Fields, as well as We Fight Monsters. He's a United States Army veteran. He's also been homeless, an alcoholic, addicted, lived on the streets, and has quite a past that I'm going to let him tell you because I wouldn't do it justice. But welcome to the show, Ben. Really pleasure to have you here, sir. And if you could, just give us a little bit of background.
Appreciate it, brother. It is a pleasure to be here. So on that Army vet part, I always like to put that in parentheses too, because I'm barely even a vet, never deployed. The short version, I lied about a whole bunch of pre-existing injuries to get into the Army after 9/11. And within a year, those injuries had resurfaced and I was more or less, asked to leave the Army honorably, of course, but I did my best. I was willing to wear a uniform, but never actually did anything cool in the military. Everything cool I've done has been as a civilian in the years since. Where do you want me to pick up? Because we could talk for literally hours about just a week in my life.
Oh, I understand that. I got a little bit of a history myself. So let's really talk about, where you went from being in the Army, what you did for the years after, and what brought you to homelessness.
Sure. So I've struggled with alcoholism and really addiction too since my teens. The first time I got locked up for it, I was 14. I turned a 10-day stay in a treatment center in California into 90 days and then ended up not graduating that program and was sent to residential treatment in Utah. Got out of that when I was 16. We moved to Alabama. My dad took a demotion to get us out of California. And really did all right for basically the rest of high school. Graduated with honors, got a scholarship to Auburn. It was not a full scholarship, but an academic scholarship, and ended up starting ROTC there in 2000. I was wavered into ROTC because I did not have an ACL. I lost that when I was 13 playing football, and was there under the understanding that before I commissioned and could go active duty, I had to get the ACL repaired. So obviously, as I mentioned, I lied to get into the Army. So when the towers came down on 9/11, I was struggling again with alcoholism and realized I was drinking my way out of college. I went across the street, I think it was September 12th, and talked to a recruiter and learned at that point in time that the right hand did not talk to the left. So they had no idea I was wavered into ROTC. From their perspective, I was a sharp kid in really good shape. Got a 99 on my ASVAB and lied about literally everything when I got to MEPS. So never done drugs, never had a drinking problem, never been on anxiety meds, never broken a bone in my life. Meanwhile, I just told you I was already locked up at 14, 15, 16, and had been on all sorts of medication to treat really symptoms of drug use that my parents thought were mental illness. I'd probably broken 15, 20 bones at that point in time. So the stint in the Army did not last long. I was honorably discharged for pre-existing medical conditions, threatened with JAG referrals and all sorts of shit when they figured out that I'd lied at MEPS, but none of that ever, came to fruition. So I got out of the Army, went back to Auburn briefly, but rapidly drank myself out. And then ended up essentially squatting in an apartment in Atlanta, and it would take hours to tell you how I got from Auburn to Atlanta. But just to kind of condense this a little bit, was struggling with meth addiction again, made contact with an old girlfriend that I'd known since I was 12, got her pregnant, ended up moving to North Carolina, and got sober. Just cold turkey, quit drinking, ended up with pancreatitis, almost died from alcohol withdrawal. But in a roundabout way, it ended up working out okay. We moved back to Alabama. I went back to college, finished, struggled, with the drinking a fair amount. Like 2005, I drank my gallbladder out. They had to remove it. I completely obliterated it. Created so many GI problems that I was the youngest person in the state of Alabama to have a procedure called a fundoplication to try to mitigate some of that damage I'd done drinking, and it didn't work. But I graduated college 2006 from University of Alabama. I went from there to Pfizer Pharmaceuticals as a sales rep. My dad had been with Pfizer at that point since he left the Army in 1984. So 30-year career at Pfizer at that point, or I guess 20 then. He's retired now. But anyway, I got on with Pfizer, and the drinking culture in the pharmaceutical industry is immense. So right back to drinking I went. And Easter Sunday, 2007, we were actually here in Georgia visiting my parents. We lived in Memphis. Pfizer had taken us to Memphis. And we got into a huge argument. By we, I mean me, my parents, my wife. I had 2 kids by this point in time. And I was like, fuck this. Can I cuss on this? Are we going to?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, cool. Sorry. I've got a potty mouth. I'll do my best to control it. But if you want authentic Ben, it's going to have some bad words. So I was like, fuck this. I got in the car and left my parents' house and started driving back towards Memphis. And I was drinking, not while driving, but I would stop and drink. And ended up in a single car accident going 130 miles an hour just outside of Scottsboro, Alabama. I was ejected from the car, went through the rear windshield, and almost died. I broke my pelvis in 3 places. The leg that I had demolished in the Army ended up getting infected with MRSA again. Almost lost it. So I got sober that day, and I stayed sober for quite a while. We went on to have, so I left Pfizer because I knew I was not going to be able to stay sober there. Went into the medical device industry, which was, in theory, a lot more profitable, and in practice it was too. But I was not satisfied or fulfilled in that. I had wanted to be an entrepreneur my entire life and had several hustles throughout college that were actually fairly profitable. So ended up starting my own business in 2009. By 2011, I had a big warehouse, a dozen employees, and it was 2011 or 12, Sergeant Deaton came across my desk as a vet, amputee, addict that needed some help. He was homeless, coming out of treatment, and you may have crossed paths with him on LinkedIn, but I'm still sober at this point in time. So I had just gotten another one of my employees through alcohol treatment, and decided to take Deaton and get him through treatment, hire him, moved him onto our couch, gave him a job. He was kicking ass, became probably one of the best friends I've ever had, and was eventually able to rent the house next door to us. And I tell you that story because it kind of comes full circle here a decade later. Somewhere around 2012, I start thinking like, I'm a big shot. I've got 5 kids. You know, I'm getting guys off the streets. Like, look at me. I'm a badass. I'm printing money. Not literally, that's figuratively. Like, business was very good, right? You know, and so I decided, I guess we decided, me, Deaton, my wife, ex-wife, that Ben could drink responsibly. And so that's what I was going to do. And that started that slippery slope back up. I ended up back in like full-blown alcoholism very quickly. Well, I say very quickly. I probably made it a year drinking responsibly. But by 2012, I set the Tennessee state record for ambulatory BAC. I walked into Baptist East with a 0.45 blood alcohol content, totally coherent and denying that I'd been drinking at all. Deaton moved back to Maine, but not before that MRSA infection came back in my leg. And the docs were prescribing me heavy amounts of narcotics, which I was taking as prescribed, but they were probably overprescribed. I have a really high tolerance to literally anything I take. And look, I've never been addicted to opiates. So like, I didn't see this as an issue. My addiction back in my teens, that was meth. And so the combination, I guess, of alcohol and opiates, I started being a real asshole to customers. And I realized, like, I'm going to lose my business. I just cussed out a guy that has spent, you know, close to 6 figures with me in the last year and a half. And so I flushed all my pills down the toilet, and I looked over at Deaton, and he's like, what the fuck did you just do? And I was like, what? And then it hit me like, I've been on these things for 6 weeks. I'm probably addicted, and I'm probably about to get really sick. And sure as shit, that's exactly what happened. But he had a solution, these little blue pills he'd been getting from the VA that I didn't know about. And they were Roxy's, so 30 milligram oxycodone. And that started a slippery slope of addiction there that spiraled with just unfathomable rapidity. And my timeline's a little fuzzy back then, but it was not long at all from a prescribed, you know, VA opiate habit to heroin. And once heroin entered the picture, which I think was right around Halloween of 2013, from the day I first touched it to an $800 a day habit was a week, maybe at most. And everything started falling apart, you know, just, I mean, so quick. And I hate needles, which might come as a surprise because I'm covered in tattoos, but I hate needles. I hate them. And somehow I'm here sticking $800 worth of dope up my arm, you know, many times a day. So we get to July 4th of 2014, and I'm moving really fast just so that we can cover as much of this as possible. But I had a 1968 GTO that me and my kids had restored, and it was, I mean, that thing ran like a scalded dog. July 4th, 2014, Erin, my ex-wife, she took the kids and left. She's like, I don't know where I'm going, or I guess she didn't know where she was going. She's like, I don't know how long I'm going for. I'm going to my dad's. I'm done. Like, we're not doing this. She found my dope. So I get in the GTO, and I'm on my way to the dope man, and I run a red light and T-bone an F-350. And I ended up pinned underneath the steering wheel. Like, my front teeth went through my lip. I had to pull my lip off of them. Smashed my right foot, and I'm pinned inside the car because I'm in a 5-point restraint. And the car burst into flames. And like, I just remember, you know, my life kind of flashing before my eyes in slow motion. It was probably seconds, but it seemed like 15 minutes. I'm just sitting there thinking, like, I'm not done. This isn't it. And I had a fire extinguisher in the car, so I pulled that out thinking, you know, thank God now I'm not going to die. And the fucking thing did nothing. Like, it did not work. So I threw it out the window, which was both a good idea and a bad idea. It broke the window, which let everybody that was standing around watching know there's somebody alive inside that car, but it also introduced oxygen. So this huge fireball goes up. I've still got the debit cards and pistol permit and all that were in my pocket and they're melted. I mean, charred edges. And somehow I did not have a burn on my body, but they pulled me out of the car. And here's how bad my addiction was, dude. I have bones sticking out of my foot. I literally had to pull my lip off of my teeth, and I start walking because I realize I'm only a mile from the dope man's house. I'm like, I'm just walking. So the ambulance drivers had to tackle me. They get me to the hospital, and they could tell this guy's definitely opiate addicted. So they gave me pretty much nothing for the pain, stitched me up, put me in a boot, and discharged me that night. I called her and told her, and she's like, well, I'm definitely not coming back. So I end up getting a ride back home somehow. Got like 35 grand in insurance money for that car, which I blew through in 9 days. And I just went on a binge, a complete and total, I'm going to burn it to the ground kind of binge. And July 28th of 2014, I'm coming back home from my binge, and I get pulled over for, I don't even know what. I had been at my warehouse, which we had a little firing range set up behind the warehouse. So I've got in my truck at the time a sub gun, an SBR, 3 suppressors, and just an ungodly amount of ammunition. So the cops immediately thought, like, these are all stolen. Oh, and by the way, you have a lot of drugs on you. So they charged me like I was Pablo Escobar. And so that was the first time I ever went to jail. In that case, I think they charged me with 14 felonies, possession with intent. I mean, for multiple substances, plus the guns, possession of a firearm during the commission of a dangerous felony times, I don't even know how many. But look, I was not committing a felony. It was personally used drugs, and everything eventually got pled down. So once that happened, all the gun charges were gone. So I ended up on drug court, and drug court ordered me into a halfway house, which is called Rebo's. And it's coincidentally, if you're paying attention, that's the halfway house we own now. I made it 8 days there before I got kicked out because I was incapable of following the rules at this place. I didn't want to be there. I have my own house. I have a business. I'm still a big shot. You can't tell me what to do. Well, I was wrong. As it turns out, Judge Dwyer could definitely tell me what to do. So he put me back in jail. I wasn't going to get it. And I think we want to focus more on what we're doing today than Ben being a dumbass out there. But the short version is I get kicked out of the halfway house that we own now. I get kicked off of drug court that we work with now. Like, we're housing people for drug court in that halfway house today. So it did come full circle, but it took a very long time. I ended up meeting Jess during that period of time. Christmas of 2014, the judge let me out of jail, and they were like, you've been going to AA meetings. I think you need to go to Narcotics Anonymous because you're clearly a junkie. Like, well, yeah, I know that. I could have told you. And they're like, okay, so you're going to NA now. And I was like, okay. And so I met Jess at NA. And for anybody watching, like, that's the worst place you could meet a prospective spouse. I do not recommend that. And Jess will tell you the exact same thing. But it worked out okay for us. It worked out like really good for us in the end. In the middle, it did not. So I get kicked off drug court. I get a $200,000 bond because I pissed the judge off. I earned that. I'm surprised he ever spoke to me again. But when you're a drug court judge, like, you get redemption. You understand some people need second, third, 43rd chances. Just not necessarily in your diversion program. So that was terminated. And Jess and Aaron actually worked together to make that bond for me, selling the belongings I had left, I guess. And we started the TV parts business back up. That was the business I was running at the time. We were essentially buying truckloads of store-return televisions, taking them apart and selling the parts to the repair industry. So 2015, Jess and I started that back up. And ended up just with a business partner situation from recovery, also from NA. Don't ever do that. I went into business with my sponsor. Like, don't do that. It ended just like you predicted it would. We all relapsed. He's a great dude. Just don't go into business with your sponsor. And I mean, to be totally honest, dude, I wasn't done fucking up, you know, and I knew that in the back of my head. Like, I'm not done yet. I have not suffered enough from this addiction. Which sounds crazy because I lost my marriage, I lost my home, I lost my business, you know, I lost my freedom. But addiction's a fickle beast, and it doesn't discriminate, and it was not done with me. So just got pregnant. I seem to have a habit of getting women pregnant very quickly. And just for clarity's sake, me, Jess, and my ex-wife, Erin, all have a great relationship. We talk literally every single day. And even though, you know, I ran mine and Erin's life into the ground, if she'd handled anything any differently than she did, I probably would be dead. And Jess will tell you the same thing. Erin's played a huge part in my recovery. Like I said, I've known her since I was 12. I mean, she's my best friend for 20 years. So, you know, we had the business back up. We all relapsed, lost the business. Jess has James. I go back to jail when James is 2 weeks old. For dope yet again. And they keep me for a month that time. I get back out. I'm still somehow miraculously not a felon, despite pissing off every cop and judge in Memphis. Thank God. You know, we ended up losing the house that Jess and I were in, which was mine and Erin's house that I bought when I worked at Pfizer. We lost it. And just through a stroke of, I don't know if you want to call it luck. I would say it was God, but we did such horrible things with it. I don't want to say it was God. Jess and I ended up in a much bigger, much nicer house. We were renting from a rapper out in Arlington. And we started the tactical business back up. You know, I'd gotten rid of all my legal cases. The chance of me being, you know, convicted of a felony is out the window. It was all misdemeanors. Everything's pled down to what it actually should have been charged as. And so we started our tactical businesses back up. Black Rifle, which I had originally started back when I had the TV parts business in 2011. And it was basically gun e-commerce. We're just selling gun parts, ammo, and apparel. And obviously when I got arrested in 2014, that all shut down. I mean, it was over with. But we started it back up in 2016 or 17, I don't even remember. And ended up becoming, like, just serendipitously one of the largest distributors of slide fire stocks, the bump stock. Well, then that jackass in Vegas shot everybody with one. We had nothing to do with that transaction, but, you know, the credit card industry came down on us and everybody else selling bump stocks, you know, like a hammer. As soon as Trump said he was outlawing those things, our credit card processor essentially, you know, was like, well, you're done. And I was way over leveraged in that product, and I knew I was, but I wasn't prepared to deal with it because I was making money hand over fist. Jess, unfortunately, had been back on pain pills since I went back to jail when James was 2 weeks old. So more or less, I had been maintaining sobriety, but she was not. And so when they took all of our money overnight, it was, I mean, somewhere over $250,000 that we had over leveraged, and that it sank us instantly. And this is why I say you don't want to meet somebody in Narcotics Anonymous. We both said fuck it simultaneously. And when you have two addicts that are trying to do life together, say that at the same time, well, I mean, we can burn it to the ground very quickly. And we did. The end of 2017, I think, is, or maybe it was early 2018 when all that happened. And, you know, we both ended up back on heroin, back on crack. And by January, it was my mom's birthday, January 5th of 2019. I'm in the Tahoe that had been seized by Shelby County and Memphis police on separate occasions that I had to buy back from them. January 5th, the Tahoe shit the bed, spun a rod, slung it through the block, on my way back from getting dope. And sitting there on the side of the road in front of Grace St. Luke's, it's a church in Memphis, which coincidentally was where I met the sponsor I went into business with. And I called Jess and tell her where I'm at, what just happened. And she's like, well, that's cool because there's like 3 linebacker dudes that just showed up to the house to evict us. So our only vehicle, this is my mom's birthday too, by the way. January 5th, 2019, our only vehicle crapped out. We lose our home, and I don't even remember how we got. I guess we Ubered or rented a U-Haul maybe. We went to the dope track. Erin's got mine and her kids. Jess's dad has Jess's oldest kid, and Jess and I have James with us. He's 2. Not even 2. He turned 2 on the dope track. So we basically just moved out to South Memphis and lived either in trap houses or in our truck. And, I hate to say this, but James was with us for a lot of that. I had been homeless in South Memphis before, between getting arrested and getting pulled into drug court, and so between July and November of 2014, when I wasn't in custody, I lived on the dope track in South Memphis on the streets or in trap houses. And we ended up right back out there in 2019. And so, our friends were prostitutes and murderers. The people that helped us make sure our kids stayed fed were some of, most of society would say are the worst people that society has to offer. And I, in large part, wouldn't argue with that. And I'm actually in the process of writing a book about all this because I know I'm just flying through this. It's like,
oh yeah.
Yeah. But May came and I'd had enough, dude. It was like just yet another murder. And I was the last person to talk to this person before they died. And I was like, I'm done. I am done. And I called my dad, and I don't even remember the conversation, but I was getting shot at and he could hear it. And he was like, dude, just come home. I'm going to get you a Greyhound ticket. Just come home. And it took a few days for me to actually show up and do it. I had left Jess that she didn't know if I was alive or dead. We had gone separate directions on the dope track. And I think she ended up going back to her dad's house. And I ended up going to Greyhound Station and got on a bus and came to Georgia. And that was it. It was the last time I did dope. May 23rd of 2019, I think. Jess stayed in Memphis. She was not ready. And I guess a week later, she's like, dude, you know what? I am done too. Get me out of here. So I went back on a Greyhound bus. We had at some point hustled up this $700 truck that we were living in. And so I got a Greyhound back to Memphis because somehow I ended up in Atlanta with the keys to the truck. And Jess was in Memphis with the truck and the kid. I can laugh about this now. It was a disaster at the time, but that $700 truck made it all the way to Georgia. And I slept on a couch with my parents because, they were nearing retirement at that point in time. They didn't have a house set up for a bunch of people to come live with them. Sure as hell not their 38-year-old son and his wife and kid. But we moved into my parents' house. Madison, she's 19 now. It's Jess's oldest daughter. Her dad was the one that was murdered in May that I was like, you know what, I'm done. I'm leaving. I've adopted her at this point. And she had a room at my parents' house. Jess and James had twin beds upstairs, and I slept on a couch. Took a BS job at this data company. And I called it a BS job. I mean, I was thinking long game at that point because they're big data. Like they sell data to huge companies. And so the short version of what I ended up doing was taking all of the consumer information I had from years of running Black Rifle when I was clean enough to do it and overlay it essentially on the entirety of the web through the data company I was consulting at after I moved to Georgia. And so we relaunched Black Rifle as instead of direct to consumer e-commerce gun brand. Now we can tell big gun brands. You think of the major gun manufacturers, major accessory manufacturers, we can tell them who is browsing the web today that looks like they're about to spend money on a gun purchase. And we use AI and machine learning to do it, but it was all based on that data set that I had, thank God, retained from, the previous 7 years. And it works really well. So you said we're going to talk about what Black Rifle does. That's what we do. We tell gun companies which devices on the internet right now. There's 1.5 billion of them in the United States. There's 17 million of them that are about to spend money on a gun product, and I know which devices they are. And so gun companies, accessory manufacturers, and outdoors companies pay us to put their ads on those devices right before they spend money. And it works really, really well. So that's how Black Rifle came to be, or how it came to be kind of what it is today. But I don't know, you want to go into how we got pulled into Afghanistan, all this other crazy shit? Like, where do you want to go next?
Well, I guess, just listening to all that, you hit a couple of bullet points already that I was going to hit on, how you and Jess got together and, how you made it in and out of addiction together, right? Because that's unheard of.
It is unheard of. And that definitely was God in action. We're both very stubborn. And if you've watched my podcast with Scott Mann, where we were sitting around the fire pit, Jess has actually stabbed me. I deserved it. But it's a miracle we made it. I have definitely did, or in the early days, everything in my power to destroy that relationship. But, this podcast that we're doing right now is called Fire Forged Leader. That relationship was forged in fire. We would not be who we are today had we not endured what we endured together. It is a miracle we made it out of it, but I think it was very much God ordained so that we would have that experience to carry into what he had in store for us now, which I never in a million years could have imagined any of this taking place. But yeah, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're good. That was beautiful. And the Fire Forge, that's exactly why that's in the title, right? It's from my background and where I came from and where I'm going. But then I wanted to reach out to other leaders that were forged in the same fashion, right? Some of my closest friends and everybody that I look up to has gone through tremendous adversity. Any of the strongest leaders out in the world, I'll tell you, have gone through hell and back to get where they're at. So really where I guess I'd like to go next is, you're back, you're making money, you're an entrepreneur again, you're selling big data. But that's not what you're known for. I mean, you are, but that's not what you're known for. It's Flanders Fields, We Fight Monsters, all the work that you do out on social media, out in the.
Yep. So I've always had a knack for social media. We were talking before we started recording about me getting kicked off back in 2020. And so everything, and you cannot dispute the God ordained nature of all this. If I actually had time to go through all of it, but a couple of things happened that set us up to do what we're doing now. One, my best friend from when I was in jail on drug court, and then actually on the streets, overdosed and died right before Christmas of 2019. And we're still living at my parents when that happened. And we'd always had it in the back of our heads that when something happened to him, it was going to send us off the rails. We were going to relapse. Like, we'd accepted that. We knew that's what we were going to do. But when that day came, that's not even close to what happened. He had nobody left. He and I had actually found his mom's decomposing body about a year and a half before that happened, before he died. And she was the last person he had in his life. So there's nobody to bury him. So I used that huge Facebook presence I had to raise money to get my best friend cremated. And we ended up raising more than it cost, not a ton more, like maybe $2,500 extra. And, I've always been an entrepreneur. $2,500 does not sound like a lot of money, but when you're living at your parents' house and you need seed money to start a business, that's plenty. And that's not what we did with the money. I gave every dime of it that was raised to the Shelby County Drug Court Foundation, because drug court is where I met him. And drug court honestly gave him, he graduated drug court and then later relapsed. But drug court gave him really the best opportunity he had ever had in his life. And even though I got kicked off drug court, I got kicked off because the system drug court had works. I was not ready for drug court. I wasn't ready to get clean, and their system weeded me out. he was ready and he graduated. So anyway, we ended up giving the extra money to drug court. And when that happened, when we did that, Jess and I went and reconnected with a lot of people from the Narcotics Anonymous and the drug court community around his memorial and his death. And, we were welcomed back with open arms, even though we had let a lot of people down and burned a lot of bridges. And that did something to us mentally, and it got our wheels turning. I got back into AA in Georgia. All right, so that's one thing. The other thing that happened that really set us on this path, that really opened our eyes to it. We enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed using my social media platform to raise money to do something good with. I also realized at that point in time the power of social media to spread good messages. And I had always used it up to that point in time to stir the pot. And that's why I got kicked off. But a switch was flipped in my head when Brandon died. And we did that. Now, this is Brandon Kelly, not Sergeant Deaton. There's two different Brandons. All right. So let's fast forward just a little bit to March of 2021. I get a message that my Army buddy needed some help again. And we'd already come out of pocket a decade before. And many times in that guy, like I said, I just moved real fast to a lot of stuff. So even though we were addicted, we were still doing good deeds to help people out. And so somebody suggested to me, was actually Robert, the COO of Black Rifle today. He suggested to me back then, he was not my COO. He actually still worked for that data company that I had gone to. He suggested we stand up a nonprofit to help homeless and addicted vets. And we had actually wanted to do this for a very long time. We even picked up the name Flanders Fields because it's the poem about a field of poppies in World War I. Heroin comes from poppies, So we went ahead and filed the paperwork with the IRS, and I guess we completed it in April of 21 to stand up a nonprofit to help homeless and addicted vets. So then in July of 2021, now remember, we're waiting for paperwork to get approved. Like I had forgotten all about this. In July of 2021, a Marine intelligence officer hits me up on the Black Rifle side and is like, I want to know more about what you guys do. And, I was like, why? That's strange. And we talked a lot. And what we do, we have a lot of device level intelligence. Like we can tell what a device on the internet cares about. We can tell what kind of content they're consuming. Not the human behind the device. I don't care about that, but the device itself. What he wanted to know was how much can we tell about the human behind the device? And so that's a real gray area. And I didn't want to get into that. You start talking about privacy and all that, right? Well, July 15th, maybe he calls me and he's like, dude, so what if it's not in America? And I'm like, well, if it's not in America, and if it's not in Europe, then the privacy law, like, what are you talking about? What are you getting at here? He's like, dude, let's get some people out of Afghanistan. And I'm like, oh, what the fuck? So we got tapped into the evac out of Afghanistan on the Black Rifle side using device level intelligence. And what we were doing was essentially mapping safe ground routes between provinces by looking at where is there an absence of devices. And if there's an absence, we can assume there's no people there. So that's a safe route to move. Before the Taliban ever made it to Kabul, we're mapping safe ground routes between provinces. Once the Taliban made it to Kabul, I start getting emails with lists of names and WhatsApp numbers from lieutenant generals in the Marine Corps. And there wasn't even time to think about how absurd this is. Like I was homeless 2 years ago at that point. Now I have a lieutenant general emailing me, asking me if I can get his people out of Afghanistan, a country I've never even been to. And the short answer was, yeah, we can help. And so we did. We poured ourselves completely into the evac out of Afghanistan. And then as the evac started slowing down, really after the bomb at Abbey, we pulled Flanders in because unbeknownst to me, on August 15th, a letter arrived in our mailbox that our nonprofit had been approved to house homeless vets. I've now got countryless vets. So we started we went balls to the wall in that. And so this ops tempo really was set then. I've been going balls to the wall for 2 years now on humanitarian stuff. if you watch me on social media, it might seem like I'm just going at this insane pace, and I am, and Jess is too. But if you know anything about trying to feed an addiction, it's not foreign to us. And I will argue with anybody that does not agree with me on this, but the hustle required to stay high is harder than what we're doing now. So I do feel like in every way, our time on the streets 100% molded us to be able to do the work we're doing today. Since the Taliban took over Kabul and the evac and all that, I've been able to pull some pretty good human capital into Black Rifle to run it more capably than I could. Some people who are far more knowledgeable about ad tech and marketing technology and data and all that. So I am able, thankfully, to focus most of my time on the nonprofit side of things, which Black Rifle in large part funds. Black Rifle funded getting, Flanders off the ground. I told you we had restarted that TV parts business. Well, when me and the sponsor got into it and both relapsed, it got sold to a third party. That third party ended up approaching me in the spring of 2020 and asked if I wanted it back. Like, just here, take it. I can't do this. They didn't give us any inventory or anything, but I'm telling you this story to tell you this. A year and a half goes by. We had gotten a warehouse here in Georgia. That's actually how we afforded to get out of my parents' house, get into a home of our own. We ended up selling that business, I think Christmas of 2021. And that's where the seed money came from to do Flanders as big as we are. So spring of 2022, we're like, I'm done doing safe houses in Afghanistan, but check this out. If I can run a safe house and keep the Taliban away 8,500 miles away, pretty sure I can run a sober living house for these vets here in America and keep the dope man away. So we go back to Memphis and make peace, make amends, however you want to word it, with Judge Dwyer and Tony Shelby, the guy who owned the halfway houses, and brought them up to speed on what we've been doing globally. And we've glossed over so much of it. There's so much I've skipped, like, Mexico, Ukraine, Ecuador. Like, we've done all sorts of weird stuff in the last few years, but we bring them up to speed on everything we've been doing, and ask them if they would be willing to maybe give us a letter of recommendation or something, because we wanted to set up several living houses in Chattanooga. And they looked at me and were like, dude, why don't you just do it here? I'm like, well, I don't want to step on Tony's toes. And Tony's like, why don't you just buy Rebus? I was like, well, I had no idea it was for sale. He goes, it is now. And so, yeah, right. They had been wanting to retire and didn't have the right person to hand the reins to. And I guess God really put it on him and his wife, Stephanie, that me and Jess were the right people to take the reins. And Tony and Stephanie have had a huge impact on my life. When they kicked me out, I could talk for years about that. They saved my life in many ways, many different times. But we ended up buying those halfway houses, and we work with drug court now, and veterans court, and mental health court, and probation, and parole, to get vets and anybody else that's willing and ready off the streets, into detox, into treatment. Because look, that's a path we've walked many times. I don't even know how many times I've been to treatment. Well over a dozen. In Memphis too. I mean, I've been to every treatment facility there is in Memphis. Every detox there is in Memphis, I've been to them. So we've got relationships with all of those, both from a personal standpoint, because we've been through those programs, and from a professional standpoint. So we're able to get people into them very, very quickly. And then we've got, the capacity to house a lot of them if they're ready to work a solid program. And that's something we're trying to take nationwide. And then we got into the sex trafficking side of things with trafficking survivors. Addiction and sex trafficking go hand in hand. I know there's, a lot of misinformation about what human trafficking looks like. Well, I mean, we deal with the reality of it every single day. 99% of cases of sex trafficking involve addiction in some form or fashion. And so you can't fight one really without coming across the other. We just decided to go ahead and fight both of them. So we're housing vets and survivors of sex trafficking free of charge at no cost to them. And then we charge rent to the regular Joes that are coming through several living programs.
So that's interesting how you say that sex trafficking doesn't look like what most people think it does. It's more in the addiction and that sort of thing. How is that?
So the legal definition of trafficking is, force, fraud, or coercion is used to get sex from a woman typically. And it's almost invariably, at least in Memphis and in the areas we operate in, it's addiction is used as a tool of coercion. So you see that addiction getting leveraged to get women to do things they wouldn't otherwise be doing.
So it's basically manipulation, right? I mean,
they're exploiting the addiction. Look, I'll tell you an anecdotal story. We had a couple of 15-year-old girls that got flagged to us a few months ago as being sex trafficked. They were running prostitution ads on one of these back page type sites, and they were minors. And they were both addicted to fentanyl. And when they were rescued, they were pissed off because they were going to get dope sick.
Mm.
And that's the majority of sex trafficking you see, at least in where we operate in Memphis, is that it is addiction fueled. And the addiction is used as leverage to exploit these girls to do something they don't want to do. Because I can tell you from experience, having been dope sick, I don't even know how many times, it is pure hell. You are living through hell. So once you get a female, I don't care how old she is, if you have a female that is addicted to opiates, she's going to do whatever the hell you want her to keep her from getting sick.
So they offer the drugs, they receive the money, these traffickers do, and use the money in the middle.
Yep.
Or use a woman in the middle, excuse me.
That's exactly right. And often they'll just pay these girls in dope. And look, you see this on the narcotics trafficking side too. I honestly think it's just as bad. You'll see addicts that get arrested for selling dope. It's not even their dope. They're carrying the risk for the narcotics traffickers, and they're getting paid in dope. So they're essentially being trafficked too. Mm-hmm. Their addiction is being used as a means of coercion to get them to take the risk and sell the drugs for the actual dope boy who is not an addict and is nowhere even near the trap house. And he's not the one getting arrested either until we step in.
It's interesting that you bring that up. I talked to Linda Harlos not too long ago, and her daughter was trafficked. A little bit different situation, but it comes down to basic needs. Her daughter had a son that needed taken care of, and there was no other means. So,
and if you offer somebody, whether you're offering them dope or a roof over their head or food to eat in exchange for sex, that's trafficking.
Right.
It's coercion.
But at this point in time, the addicts feel like this is a basic need as well, right? I mean,
look, dude, it's even more than a basic need. I went without shelter. I went without food. I went without water because all that mattered was dope. It is wholly and fully consuming. It becomes your entire existence. You need dope more than you need anything. I have been up more days than I can count. I have gone more days than I can count without food in lieu of a substance. That's how you end up homeless living in a truck with a 2-year-old. That doesn't happen by accident. All right. I mean, maybe 0.1% of people that are living in a truck with a 2-year-old are there by accident or just by some tragic set of circumstances. 99% of the time, it's because your money is going to something else. And for us, it was drugs.
I think that's important for people to hear too, right? I mean, it's real easy to be a bystander and see, someone addicted, someone prostituting themselves and think, oh, those are all personal choices. And they may have started out like that.
It starts with personal choice, absolutely. But like I told you with my addiction, I've struggled with alcoholism since I was young, but the addiction to opiates, it was actually prescribed for an Army injury. It starts like that. It starts innocently enough for a lot of people. And did I make bad choices? Absolutely. I chose to switch from prescribed meds to heroin because it was cheaper. I chose that. But very quickly, and if you've ever struggled with addiction, you know this, that power of choice is removed. All right. It is no longer a choice. It becomes a physical need. And I don't expect your average American to go out there and help addicts that are homeless on the streets. You don't have the skill set for that. There's no reason you should care other than you're a human and we're supposed to love our neighbor. That used to be me though. So I do care about that. And I do have the means to actually make a meaningful difference in their lives beyond just feeding them today. We can actually bring them the hope that, hey, I've been right there where you're at. And in Memphis, especially on the dope tracks where we operate, I can tell these people, look, dude, I used to live literally right here on this corner. I used to do dope in that house. In fact, the dope houses that we're buying and renovating, they're ones I used to live in. They're ones I used to squat in. They're ones I've been stabbed in or shot at in. Like, it's very close to home. We didn't just pick Memphis and pick that street randomly. We started this mission right where we should have died. And I feel like it's I don't feel like, we made a promise to God when I woke up in that empty lot next to the track house we just closed. I woke up in an empty lot next to that house 4 years ago and made a promise to God, if you get me out of here, I'm going to come back and I'm going to save everybody I can. And so what you see us doing today is us trying to keep that promise.
Yeah, that's awesome. Beyond loving your neighbor, right? If everybody cares about the people that they don't care about today, right, and brings everybody up, our whole society goes up.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you just look at it at that basic sense, right?
Yeah. We've got to stop as a society, stop looking at things. There's two mentalities that I think are driving us further and further away from where we should be. And it's, one, it's the your fault mentality. And then this is where I hate politics comes into play. All right. Everybody wants to blame somebody else for every problem we've got. And then the other side of that is the not my problem mentality. So, we all want to think it's not our problem when we see a junkie out there, but narcotics trafficking and sex trafficking are driving a majority of the violent crime that is affecting your city. So it is our problem, whether we want to admit it or not. It's all of our problem and it's nobody's fault. Like, we can all work together and make a difference here.
Oh, agreed. And, if you want to bring it closer to home too, I have 8 kids. You got a slew of kids. We all have kids, right? One of these kids is going to have problems, There's no doubt about it. And we can have that I don't give a shit mentality. But at the end of the day, that could be one of our kids. Just, your parents are good people, right?
Absolutely.
You still ended up there.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you bring that up because there's no logical reason for my life to have gone the direction it did. I had an idyllic childhood. I have great parents. They're still married. They're amazing. They did nothing wrong. I chose a very hard life. And as you can see today by what we're doing, my life was worth saving. I'm very glad that I'm still here. And I know a lot of other people are too. You don't know where that next Ben or Jess could be out there together. Because I promise you, at one point in time, I looked like somebody you would not want to go anywhere near, just because I was gross, disheveled, bloody, dirty, and I see people that look just like that all the time in Memphis, and you never know who that next rock star is going to be that comes up and saves a whole bunch of lives. And to your point, they could be the person that saves your kid, and I guess at the end of the day, life's just a lot easier when we start looking at each other in a more of a, what need do you have that I can meet right now kind of way. And I think if you look at businesses in particular, servant leadership is making a huge resurgence across so many industries right now, where even in a business context, we're looking at every interaction as, how can I be of service to this person? Take that outside the boardroom, man. Take that outside of the office. Take that to the streets. Have that same mentality when you're out there, because you can do something for literally anybody. I don't care how well off or how bad off they are. There's something you can do for everybody you come into contact with. And look, man, life's just a lot more fun when you approach it in that manner.
Oh, agreed. Well, man, I know you're on a little bit of a time constraint. So just to wrap this up, of course, we talked about a couple of organizations. The first one I'm going to flash across the bottom is, of course, Flanders Fields. this is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Ben, but this is really the 501 that you use to really help those addicted, homeless veterans and get them off the street when they're ready, willing, and able.
That's exactly right. We try to be an ever-present hand for vets who are struggling with anything to grab onto when they're ready. You can't make them get clean before they're ready, but when they're ready, we want to always be there.
So for the people who are listening to this on audio only, it's www.flandersfields.org. And there's places where you can donate and help out the cause for veterans there. Now, the interesting thing is as Ben mentioned, he ran into a lot of different circumstances when he got into this line of work. So that's when we get into the We Fight Monsters. And that, go ahead, Ben.
On We Fight Monsters, our mission started, we wanted to get vets off the streets of Memphis. And so in that work, we encountered a whole lot of people that wanted help that were not vets and were never even considered serving. And I'll be damned if I'm going to step over the dead body of somebody just because they don't have a TD-214. So Jess and I started personally doing, and then it was like, okay, 95% of the people that are ready for help are not vets. We can't afford this. So we stood up We Fight Monsters to stand in that gap for the non-veterans. Since then, Monsters has taken more of a lean towards sex trafficking survivors and their kids. So we do a lot to fight human trafficking, to fight sex trafficking, to get survivors clean, sober, to give them purpose. So that if you look at Flanders Fields and We Fight Monsters, our teams are essentially the same. The mission is very much the same. We even use the same sober living houses. It's just when we filed the 501 for Flanders Fields, it had that veteran qualifier in there. So we needed something that's basically the exact same that doesn't say they have to be a vet. And so that's what We Fight Monsters is.
And for both of these organizations, for all the listeners here, I want to let you know, if you go and you follow Ben or Jessica online, you will find out really quickly that every human matters. They're not sitting at a boardroom table making decisions, where money goes, things like that. They're out there, they're tearing down houses, working with people one-on-one, on the front lines. It's not, just a foundation donation station, right?
Yeah. And I'll add to that. We may have screwed ourselves a little bit in making it that way. None of us take checks from the nonprofit. All of the fundraising is grassroots. We don't have paid fundraisers. We don't have development directors. We don't hold expensive fundraiser, galas or any of that, which part of me wishes maybe we had done it that way because we'd have more money. Both of these organizations stay broke. Like I'm not even joking about that. It is a monthly battle to make sure we make the mortgage payments on those halfway houses, which myself and Robert personally guaranteed. Like Sparrow House, the trafficking survivor house for trafficking survivors and their babies that we just stood up. I personally signed that lease. I personally made the first month's rent on that because both orgs stay broke. We spend money on recipients and people in need as quickly as we can raise it. And it's all grassroots done.
So I'm just going to ask everybody, if you're capable, this is an outstanding mission in both of those organizations, but there's a third option as well. Yes.
So I had a stroke of, I want to say brilliance, and it did turn out to be that way. OnceAmerican.com, we sell apparel on there. So you can get t-shirts supporting the mission of We Fight Monsters, of Flanders Fields. Yep, there we go. There's my favorite one right there. You're wearing it today. Elon Musk actually retweeted a picture of me holding a sign wearing that shirt that went incredibly viral. So the shirt's still there. It's available. It says "Hunt Your Local Pedophile." Disclaimer: we are not promoting vigilantism or inciting violence with that shirt. We are specifically talking about helping build target packages on human traffickers, narcotics traffickers, to hand off to our law enforcement partners. So OnceAmerican.com, if you buy a t-shirt from there, every ounce of profit from those shirts is going directly to We Fight Monsters, to Flanders Fields, or to trafficking survivors that we employ to design these shirts using basic AI tools. So that's a very cool thing you can do. You can support the shirts and support a good cause at the same time. And one thing we didn't get into that I do want to talk about. So, I mentioned we ended up homeless in South Memphis, and I mentioned, or may have mentioned, two different streets, Melrose Street and Wilbur Street. Those are the streets where Jess and I essentially lived, squatted, or lived in a vehicle. Saw, I don't even know how many people murdered, just shootings, car thefts, rapes, robberies, all sorts of horrendous things happened on these two streets. 6 months ago, just 6 months, this has moved very fast. I had the crazy idea that we were going to start buying and closing the trap houses, the dope houses out there. And that's what we've been doing. And so in 6 months' time, they have gone from two of the most violent streets in South Memphis to not having a single crime reported on them in the last 90 days. That's insane. Just think about that. So we're not only helping the people who are out there struggling, this literally is helping the entire community. And yeah, I know that the crime has just gone somewhere else, with the exception of one of them who's in federal prison now, thanks in no small part to those target packages I just mentioned. But if we can get the funding, so I'm hoping somebody like Elon Musk is listening to this. If we can get the funding, what we're doing is replicable and it's scalable, and it absolutely has demonstrable results fighting crime. I mean, we're saving lives and fighting crime at the same time, and we can prove it.
That's awesome. You just push it out, get it, push it all the way to the ocean, right?
Yeah. Look, here's my goal, and this is going to sound insane, okay? But 6 months ago, closing a trap house sounded insane. My goal is to get Memphis, Tennessee out of the top 5 most violent cities in America, because ever since Memphis came across my radar as a kid, it's been there. It's usually number 1. I want it out of the top 5.
There's something interesting in that too, Ben. I would imagine that people who live that lifestyle can't imagine living any other lifestyle until they see it. Right? Yeah,
100%. And more than once, I've had women that are out there on what's known as the hoe track tell me the only reason I got out is because I'm white. And that hurt me to my core. Not because I felt insulted, but because they don't believe, just like you said, they can't imagine anything else for themselves. This is how they grew up. This is the only life they've ever known. I'm happy to report that the chick that said that to me is now sober, working, and is in a place of her own now. But we've had more than one dope boy, an actual drug dealer, narcotics trafficker, like I'm talking moving weight, flip to our side. Now, we're not trying to put people in jail. The only time we ever, unless they're, pedophiles. On the narcotics side, we don't want to see addicts going to jail. We want to see them get better. We've had multiple dope boys come to our side. We actually had one drug dealer and former pimp get 7 women off the street in a 5-day period of time. That's insane. Our number 1 referrer for rescues of trafficked women is a former pimp who decided he did not want to be that person anymore.
Wow. Well, we are definitely going to have to get back together again.
Oh, yeah.
Ben.
Yeah.
You and Jess both. I'd love to have you on at the same time. But I really appreciate your time today. God bless you, brother. And thanks for coming on, man.
You too, bro. Thank you so much.
You have just experienced the heat and pressure of the forge. Remember, words without action are meaningless. Now, after the heat of the forge, shape your thoughts, quench your brain, then put your new tools to use, adding to your leadership. Tune in next week for more lessons from the forge.